Hi, and welcome to Quarantine Cocktails with Chad and Nicole. Today we're talking about the last word cocktail.
So the last word consists of equal parts gin, green chartreuse, maraschino liqueur, and fresh lime juice. So it's pretty easy to remember. It was first published in Ted Saucier's cheeky 1951 cocktail book Bottoms Up. We call it cheeky because it also has some scantily clad pinup ladies in it as well as cocktail recipes. He claimed that the drink was invented some 30 years earlier at the Detroit Athletic Club, which was an exclusive men's club in Detroit for the sort of well-to-do society. For a while then, it was believed to have been a Prohibition-era cocktail, but later research found it on the menu there as early as 1916, where it was actually the most expensive cocktail on the menu, coming in at about 35 cents, which is $8.50 in today's money.
So cheaper than a cocktail out
Much
around
cheaper.
town today. So the drink was possibly invented in honor or in honor of Frank Fogarty, who was a big vaudeville star at the time. And he was known as the Dublin Minstrel. He was quite well known for his monologues, and he performed at the Detroit Athletic Club around that time. So potentially it was sort of named the last word in honor of his monologues, which he closed his act with. It is also believed that the cocktail was introduced by Fogarty to various places that he traveled around to afterwards, including taking it to New York, which is kind of where it grew in popularity. Interesting thing is that there's very little known about the cocktail after that 1951 publishing, which the first time it appeared in print was also kind of the last time it was really heard of, and it seemed to have faded into obscurity during the 50s.
Here in Seattle, the cocktail was revived by Murray Stetson in about 2004 when he was looking for something novel to put on the menu of the Zigzag Cafe. Those of you in Seattle probably know that very well. It's a great place. From there, it became something of a cult favorite around Seattle and the Portland area, and then it spread across the United States fairly quickly. It quickly spawned a number of different variants as well, which kept the basic four-part template of the recipe: a base spirit, an herbal liqueur, a sweet liqueur, and citrus, but substitutes one or more of the ingredients. So all the variants have clever names and riffs on the last words, such as closing argument, ultima, palabra, and eulogy.
Yes, and probably the most famous or most well-known of the last word variants is one called the Final Ward, which was introduced in 2003 by bartender Phil Ward at New York City's Death & Co. That 2007, I'm sorry. And he substituted rye and lemon for the gin and lime to create that variant, which is quite a delicious variant. Murray Stetson, the bartender who reintroduced the cocktail, by the way, was named Best Bartender in America in 2010 at the Tales of the Cocktail event.
He's legit.
Yes, absolutely.
So the last word's probably the most well-known cocktail using green chartreuse. So now we've already talked about green chartreuse in our daiquiri episode. Those of you who haven't seen it, we use it in the daiquiri, which isn't normally used, but our version did. And it's a quick reminder on what green chartreuse is. It's herbaceous and it's produced by French monks, the recipe going back at least until the early 1600s, so quite an old traditional recipe.
Yep, absolutely.
I think 130 different herbal,
Yeah, and also quite strong, 55% alcohol. So those monks, they know how to pack a punch there. We also talked about maraschino liqueur and cocktail cherries quite a bit in our episode called the Manhattan Redux. So you go check that out for more info about the long history of the Croatian Maraska cherry, maraschino liqueur, and why cocktail cherries should never be bright red, ever.
Unless you're going for that. For today's demoed cocktail, we're bringing back the Sipsmith VJOP, which we love. The VJOP stands for Very Juniper Overproof, and it's a strong gin, clocking in at about 55% alcohol by volume. So given that
Yeah, 57 even.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So given that relatively high alcohol content and strong flavors, getting a good amount of dilution in this cocktail is very, very important.
Yes, and so a difference guide online says that the last word, he recommends adding 1/3 of an ounce of water if you're not using particularly wet ice. Or you can do as I recommend and shake quite a bit longer, up to 45 seconds. Although be warned that the shaker will be almost painfully cold by the end of that, as you'll see when we demonstrate. Here's the chartreuse bottle for those of you who haven't seen the chartreuse. It's this wonderful green color, which is what will give the last word its characteristic green color.
Luxardo.
Yep. And also the last word, the garnish is not, the traditional garnish is not quite really known, but people have suggested using a lime wheel or a cocktail cherry. Here we'll lean into the Luxardo theme with the original maraschino cherry from Luxardo, which are delicious, and
Not
authentic
bright red.
Marasca cherries in maraschino syrup. So that'll be good. We have our fresh limes, and also in our demoed cocktail, we're actually incorporating a bit of lemon juice. So, and I'll talk about that briefly. So here is the here is the recipe for the classic last word. As you can see, equal parts of all of the 4 ingredients, and we're going to shake. We're going to double strain, and then the garnishes that I mentioned. For our version, we're going to follow that pretty closely, except we're going to cut the lime with a little bit of lemon. I know it's maybe a bit fussy, but I actually really like the way that sort of brightens and cleans up the finish a bit on the cocktail for my taste. I'm also noting that we're going to add in our drops of saline, which we talked about previously when we were working on some of our other citrus-based drinks. So, whenever we have a citrus-oriented drink, we tend to bring in the saline. It cuts the bitterness and brings forward more of the sweet and tart flavors because your tongue actually blocks some of those bitter receptors in the tongue, which is a nice effect. You won't taste the saltiness, but you will get those. We're calling this the Swan Song in honor of the use of the Sipsmith gin, which uses a swan as its logo. So, all right, I think we're pretty much ready to go.
Okay.
So we're going to be making 2 cocktails at once. So I'll be using 1.5 ounces jigger for most of the ingredients here. So that'll double up the recipe. I will start with the Sipsmith. So two of the components are 55% and above. I believe the maraschino is somewhere around 30%. 32%. So, and then we have only 1/4 is the citrus. So this is going to be a pretty boozy drink. I would recommend sipping it. Sure, either way. I would recommend sipping it and not draining it too quickly. You should get sort of the flavor of each of the components should hit you kind of in waves. And so you'll taste the herbal notes of the chartreuse, you'll taste the sweet maraschino, you'll taste the citrus and the juniper of the gin. And each one, these are really strong flavors overall, and normally you might think that these flavors would just battle it out and kind of create an incongruous experience, but somehow through the magic of mixology, this recipe actually, they pull in these different directions but give you a great overall experience. And so I think it's a pretty interesting cocktail. All right, so we've got that was our fresh citrus juice. Thank you for freshly squeezing those. We always freshly squeeze because the citrus starts to react and changes the flavor profile if you let it sit too long. We're going to use our saline solution, 5 grams of salt, put into 20 milliliters of water, and then I just store this little dropper in my fridge. So
2 drops?
2 drops per drink, so 4 drops total there. And I think we are ready to roll on the shaking. All right, so I'm gonna go for a good long period with the shake. Like I said, it's gonna take a lot to get this properly diluted. I wanna really get even more dilution because of the strong proofing. It holds up well to the dilution, but I really wanna get the dilution to bring out the flavors, mellow them just a touch, and just have a great overall experience.
Okay, so go ahead and shake, and I'll put the recipe up while you're shaking. Again, one more time, just to show it. Your hand stuck to the glass.
Almost. We'll see when I try to pull them off.
You don't need a Christmas story moment.
All right, I think that's about, that's pretty cold, pretty frosty, and
double
somewhat
strain.
painful. We will double strain because we use citrus, and we also shook, so we want to keep out the small ice bits.
Mm-hmm.
So this starts with 3 ounces of components, but you really want to get it up to about 4.5, or maybe even slightly more for this particular cocktail. So that should almost fill these little Nick and Nora's. Thanks, babe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. Yep. No, I think that's good.
Okay.
All right, so these are 5-ounce Nick and Nora's, so
You can see it's this lovely light green color.
Yep. And then we take our maraschino sherries. And we'll put those on now.
Yeah, we learned the pronunciation is maraschino.
That's
I've been saying it wrong my whole life.
There you go.
Oh, are you gonna?
So there we go. Now, let me give you the last word.
It's the first time in history that's ever happened. Cheers. It's a pretty color. It's good.